afternoon, everyone. This is North of Fair Conversations Without Barriers. I'm your host, Doug from Ontario, Canada. It is 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here in Ontario, Canada. Hope everybody's having a good start to the week. Mine is going all right. Today, we'll talk about optics over outcomes. Barrie, Ontario emergency and the politics of blame. Sorry about that. And welcome back to the North Affair Conversations Without Barriers. Today we're talking about a city that's reached its breaking point and a government that's still playing optics. Barrie, Ontario has declared a state of emergency over homelessness. But instead of confronting the root causes, the mayor framed it as a crisis of lawlessness, drug use, and public disorder. This isn't just a policy failure, it's a political maneuver. This optics over outcomes, Barrie's emergency, and the politics of blame. Today on September the 9th, the mayor of Barrie, Ontario stood outside the Barrie Courthouse, flanked by tents and encampments, and declared a state of emergency under the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act. He cited rampant drug use, weapons, and drug money as reasons for the declaration. He said, we will not be accepting that in any way any longer. The emergency orders allows the city to fast-track shelter expansion, hire contractors, and clear encampments, but also reframes homelessness as a threat, not a failure of policy. Now, this crisis didn't just start in 2025. I've talked about this before. It started in the 80s and the 90s when governments began pulling back from affordable housing. Federal programs were slashed. Provincial rent controls were weakened. And municipalities were left to manage the fallout. Fast forward today, Ontario removed rent caps on units built after 2018. Landlords can hike rents without restrictions. Affordable housing is being lost faster than it's being built. Barrie's emergency isn't a surprise, it's a symptom. The mayor of Barrie's framing wasn't accidental. It wasn't accidental. By linking homelessness to lawlessness, he's shifting the narrative from compassion to control. It justifies enforcement, it deflects responsibility, and it politicalizes public frustration. A person from the Busby Center pushed back. Speeches like this that keep equating homelessness with lawlessness do not help. It's a blame game. This isn't leadership, it's optics. And if we let that framing stand, we lose the chance to fix what's broken. Instead of declaring war on encampments, cities should be declaring war on the conditions that create them. And that means reinstating rent protections, funding supportive housing, coordinating federal, provincial, and municipal responses, treating housing like infrastructure, not speculation. Because homelessness isn't inevitable, It's engineered, and it can be dismantled. So what does this mean for Canada? Barrie won't be the last city to break. If governments don't respond with urgency, clarity, and coordination, we'll see more emergency declarations, more encampments, more frustration, more political blame. But we don't need more optics. We need outcomes. And that starts with telling the truth about how we got here and what it'll take to get out of this. Barrie just didn't declare an emergency. It declared the consequences of decades of neglect. And if governments don't respond with real solutions, this won't be the last city to break. Framing homelessness as lawlessness isn't leadership, it's deflection. And also, again, in his official statement, the mayor of Barrie, our city will not allow lawlessness to take over our community. If you refuse that help, you cannot stay in these encampments. He's explicitly linking homelessness with lawlessness, framing encampments as a threat to public safety, not just a symptom of policy failure, and that framing carries serious implications. So, what might this mayor of Barrie be implying? Homelessness equals criminality. By using terms like lawlessness, weapons, and drug money, the mayor implies that people experiencing homelessness are inherently dangerous or disruptive. That's not just inaccurate, it's stigmatizing. Refusal of services equals justification for removal. He's suggesting that anyone who refuses help forfeits their right to remain in public spaces. But many people in encampments have already tried and been failed by the system, whether due to the lack of shelter, beds, mental health supports, or safe housing options. Emergency powers equals enforcement first, and this framing justifies the use of emergency powers to clear encampments, hire contractors, and enforce protocols aggressively. It prioritizes containment over compassion and optics over outcomes. The political strategy behind the language, this isn't just about Barrie, Ontario. It's a broader trend. Across Canada, some municipal leaders are using public safety language to appease frustrated residents, deflect from provincial and federal housing failures, justify enforcement heavy responses without long-term solutions. It's a classic political maneuver. Blame the visible symptoms, not the invisible systems. When mayors call homelessness lawlessness, he's not solving the crisis. He's scapegoating the casualties. If we let that framing stand, we don't just lose the narrative, we lose the humanity. The Ontario system, the Ontario's homeless system, is overloaded. Here's what the data shows. 81,000 Ontarians experience homelessness, a 25% increase in just 2 years. Chronic homelessness nearly doubled, reaching 41,512 people. The city of Toronto alone shelters 12,000 people per night. yet still turns away hundreds daily due to lack of space. The province's 44.5 million investment in 2025 is just 4% of what's needed annually to end chronic homelessness. And while demand surges, frontline services are underfunded, provincial spending hasn't kept pace with inflation or need, understaffed, outreach teams, shelter workers, and case managers are burning out, undersupported, volunteers are stretched thin, and mental health supports are scarce. Nowhere to go, no one to help. This is the reality on the ground. Shelters are full, drop-ins are overwhelmed, transitional housing is backlogged, supportive housing is underbuilt, and rent keeps rising, especially since Ontario removed rent caps on units built after 2018. So when cities like Barrie declare emergencies, it's not just about encampments. It's about a system that's been left to collapse under its own weight. Now, by declaring a state of emergency, does it work? How many provinces in the past have done this? What was the outcome? So, does declaring a state of emergency over homelessness work? In theory, yes, it can. Unlock emergency powers to bypass red tape, accelerate funding, staffing, and shelter expansion, signal urgency to higher levels of government, mobilize public attention in media coverage. But in practice, it depends entirely on what follows the declaration. Without coordinated provincial and federal support, it risks being a loud alarm with no fire truck on the way. Who's declared it before? And what happened? British Columbia, 2021 through to 2023. Cities like Vancouver and Prince George declared local emergencies over encampments. Outcomes: temporary shelter expansions, but no long-term housing surge. Provincial response: patchwork funding, limited coordination. Toronto 2023. Advocates push for a state of emergency. City stopped short. Outcome: federal funding increased, but shelter capacity remained maxed out. No formal emergency declared, but pressure led to new agreements. Saskatchewan, 2024-2025. Regina and Saskatchewan signed direct federal agreements after provincial delays. Outcome: $8 million in federal funding for shelter beds, transitional housing, and case management. Emergency framing helped bypass provincial gridlock. 2025 today declared emergency on September the 9th, citing lawlessness and encampment growth. Barrie, Ontario. The outcome, the TBD, it allows the city to hire contractors, enforce protocols, and build a task force. The real test: will Ontario and Ottawa respond with funding and housing, not just enforcement? what makes it actually work. Emergency declarations only work when paired with immediate funding from higher governments, community-led response plans, not just police sweeps, long-term housing commitments, not just temporary shelters, public transparency on outcomes and timelines. Is this an emergency or an excuse? What declaring a crisis really means for the homeless. The risk of political optics. Emergency declarations can be powerful, but they can also be political theater. And when mayors like the Barrie, Ontario mayor links homelessness to lawlessness, they're not just describing a crisis, they're defining the response. And the response often prioritizes enforcement over empathy. It justifies police sweeps, forced removals, and emergency powers without addressing the root causes. That's not leadership, that's optics. What actually drives change? Let's talk about outcomes. Federal government community encampment response plans are working when cities use them properly. They fund new shelter spaces, transitional housing, case management to help people find and keep permanent housing. But provinces like Ontario have stalled. Again, rent caps were removed for units built after 2018. Funding is stagnant. And frontline services are overwhelmed. Declaring a state of emergency is only step one. Step two is building a system that can respond. Instead of declaring war on encampments, cities should be declaring war on the conditions that create them. That means reinstating rent protections, funding deeply affordable housing, coordinating federal and provincial partners, listening to frontline workers and lived experience advocates, because homeless isn't inevitable, it's engineered. So Barrie, Ontario just didn't declare an emergency. It declared the consequences of decades of neglect. And if governments don't respond with urgency, clarity, and coordination, this won't be the last city to break. Declaring a crisis doesn't fix it, it just names it. Emergency in name only. Why declaring a crisis didn't fix homelessness? Declaring a state of emergency should unlock action. And this is where we are today. Optics over outcomes, emergency, and the politics of blame. Thank you for joining me today. This is North of Fair Conversations Without Barriers. I'm your host, Doug from Ontario. Thank you for listening. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your day. And I'll be back soon. Thank you.